Hello viewers, welcome to this tutorial. In this session we are learning how to use built-in syntaxes or Python syntaxes, okay, to handle runtime errors. Okay, so let's just begin with a few of them. So these are the ones we have to know: try, except, else, and finally. Now if you watch my tutorials on looping statement, you realize that else is not only used for if statement, but in most programming languages that you only have else for if statement, but in Python else is used in handling loop statements, is used in handling errors. So Python is actually interested in the way it works. So these are the syntaxes you're going to be using: try, except, else, and finally. Okay, so let's jump into what we have to do. So it works just like the if statement. All right, we have if, else, if, and the others. So when should we use our try? Anytime you tell Python to try, you are sending a signal to Python to focus on the code under the try. Alright, let me explain what I said with code. So we start with try. Okay, so try, you bring your colon, and it uses indentation. So I put my hand on the Alt key and I can click on several of them and just press the tab. Okay, so that's PyCharm. I don't know if it works for other IDEs like Visual Studio, but there are ways you can work with each and every one of them. Alright, so try just works like the if statement. It has a colon, it has indentation. So anything under the indentation is under try. Anything outside the indentation is not under try. So okay, so if Python sees this try, Python will begin to put focus on this code, and anything that comes after the try will then be a resolving agent for what happens within the try. Okay, now as I said, focus on error handling. We are not doing anything apart from handling errors. So don't take your mind off anything apart from how we can use Python to handle errors within our same Python code. Okay, so we are trying something. If this does not work, so even in our real life problems, okay, you try one thing, it doesn't work, you try another. It's all like just doing something without a perception of try. But anytime you're trying something, meaning you have another option. Okay, so this try doesn't work alone. It works with what is known as except. Okay, so what we want to do is Python, try these lines of code, but keep an eye on this code. So it doesn't work like any other code where Python is just printing, displaying something, declaring a variable. No, that is not how Python is working right now. So it will keep its eye on the code just because of this syntax called try. So should it find any error within the code, it jumps to the except. The difference between this and the if statement is the conditional statements have conditions with them. So if the condition with the if is not true, it jumps with the condition with the else if or elif, or it moves to the else. But with try, it works on each and every one of this code except it finds an error, then it jumps to the other point. And bear in mind, if it finds the error at the line 4 of the code, it doesn't execute the line 5, it jumps straight to the except. Okay, so if it finds an error with line 3, it jumps all these ones and moves to the latter part. So that is what happens. So immediately it finds an error with one line of code, it jumps to whatsoever exception here is handling it. So except also means that do this. Okay, I'll explain why we should use except to handle specific errors, but this except is kind of general. So except print you have an error. Okay, so what are the possibilities of error occurring in our code? Now, we should check through when we should use the try. That is very relevant. Should you just use the try at the beginning of your code, at the latter part of your code? No, you can have 1 million tries within your code, depending on what your code is actually doing. So if you're having a whole source code dealing with receiving input from the user, GUI, you don't need to have try at the beginning, try at, no, that is not a concept. Have this concept like the if statement. You can have billions of if statements within your code depending on what you want to if on. Okay, whatever you want to put a condition on, that is what you do. The same thing applies to the try. The number of things you have the conscience of it being an error, or the thoughts in your head which gives you the possibility of there being an error occurring, then you use the try so we don't have all those errors in front of our code and every other stuff. Okay, so if I should run this code, what are the possible errors being occurred in this code, or that can occur within this code? Now system value is 12, user value is entered. Okay, then we divide the system value by the user value. What will happen within this code is, what if the user enters a string value and I'm converting a string to an integer? There will be an error. What if the user enters an integer value but a 0 value, and any number divided by 0? It's not possible. So these are the two errors we can find within this code. Okay, either the user enters a string or either the user enters an integer but 0. So if I should run this code without any error handlings, let me copy this code alone. Okay, if I should copy this code and cut everything, paste it here. So this is the code I have. Let's see what happened. Alright, so there's it. So if I should only have this code and run it for you, most of you have watched it in the previous tutorial. I say 0, it gives me an error, 0 division error. Please, another tip for you, take note of these errors. Anytime you are dealing with a runtime error and you see errors like this, 0 division error, these are the names you will be typing within your except. Okay, you understand it when we get there. And if I run this code again and enter, you realize I see value error. So these are the errors we'll be seeing within our code, and these are the same names we'll be typing with our except. Okay, so this is the thing that is happening. So we have to be able to handle value error and 0 division error. Alright, so if I highlight all this, I have to say try. Now what do I want Python to try? Try this for me. But this is not the point. I can take this totally out of my code. Okay, as I said earlier, the try doesn't begin. It's not necessary to give try to the beginning of your code. No, put try where you want to handle try. So try user value entry, because the entry could be string instead of integer, and try user value division by the, or try system value divided by user value. Why? Because the user could enter 0. And that will be a problem in my code. Okay, so if you try and you see an error, what do you want me to do? I want you to say you have an error within your code. Okay, so if I should run this code and I enter 0, you have an error within your code. If I should rerun the program and enter, oh, I entered nothing. Okay, and I enter hello, it still says you have an error within your code. Okay, so this is error handling. Instead of splitting the thing over the user and letting the user see all forms of errors, you have to handle them, because sometimes you need to do a whole bunch of things, like re-ask the user to enter again if it is a value error. If the user enters 0, ask the user to re-enter another value. Okay, so these are some of the things we'll be doing. Now, putting this line of code within the try will cause no harm. Alright, it will cause no problem. The reason why I would like to put it within is because it's just one line of code. Okay, but if you have thousands of lines of code and dealing with them, don't bother yourself putting the try at the beginning of your code. Please only put the try where you are supposed to debug, or where you are supposed to handle the error. Okay, where you're supposed to handle the error, that is where you have to put a try. So don't bother yourself putting it a whole. This is just one line of code. I don't want to leave it outside, it will be lonely. Okay, but if you have thousands of lines of code, don't bother putting the try there. Only put the try where you have to enter the error. Okay, let me try to give you a good practice so you do it yourself. Alright, so this is it. Put it outside and only put the try where there is a possibility of an error occurring. Okay, then I jump to except. Now there are two things that could happen, which I've already mentioned the error. What if the user enters 0, I want to do some other thing? And what if the user enters a string, I want to do some other thing? Okay, so Python allows us to use the except to handle specific errors. So if I hover over it, see what happens. They tell me two broad exception clause. What it means is except can be used to handle individual errors rather than a broad error. So if there is a different error, just see, if I enter a variable here, I say print value. I have not declared any variable called value. So if I should run this code again and everything goes well, it shows me this code. Okay, you made a mistake. Why? Because after dividing, it sees this. So it still has to display the except. Okay, but just imagine what happens if I enter 0. It skips this one. It skips this display, because it has seen an error right here. I said earlier on that anywhere it detects an error, it skips every code underneath. So it detects an error here because I entered, no, an error here rather because I entered 0. Okay, so it skips this one actually. Let me make it more technical. If I enter any value, a string, so it skips the print statement and it skips this one as well because this is an error. So it jumps directly to say you have an error within your code. Okay, so this is how to deal with try and the other things. Know how they work. That the code beneath will never work if it finds an error. It jumps to the except. But I want to handle individual errors. Okay, I'll teach you how to handle the error as well we saw, which is the value error. It's called the name error. So let's move to except to handle particular errors. Okay, so we want to use the except to handle particular errors. So let's jump to say zero division error. Okay, so in zero division error, meaning we are trying to limit the except from being a broad value, say, oh, if any error occurs. No, that's not what we want. So we are saying if a zero division error occurs. Now, remember what I said earlier, by when they gave us the error, they specified zero division error. The other one also said value error. So those are the names we'll be typing here. So Python actually handles runtime error so perfect enough that it gives you the name to type within your except. Okay, so those of you who saw it, just take note of that. It's really helpful. Let me see if I still have that. I'm not sure I have it. Okay, let's just continue. Let me see here. Alright, it just pays something else. Okay, so except zero division error, say, so I can be able to specify the functions I want to perform underneath. You cannot enter a zero value, or maybe number cannot be divided by 0. Okay, so all I'm trying to say right now within this code is you can specify your except to only zero division error. With this, I can say number cannot be divided by 0, so I've specified my error. So I'm not giving a broad value to the user. And moreover, there are some other things you can do. If anything you want to do under zero division error, anything you want to perform, you can actually go there and do it. So we can have several excepts within the code, because with this except is only handling zero division error. If I enter 0, it tells me number cannot be divided by 0. But if I enter a string, it prompts an error. So see the name, this is what I'm talking about, value error. So Python is good when handling runtime errors. So all I have to do is type that value error exactly the same way, spelled capital L and capital E, value error. Then bring it and say you need to enter only string values. Okay, only string values. So if I should run my code, I have string, you need to enter only string values. If I have my 0, zero minus, you need to only enter string values, because 0 minus works like a string. Okay, so 0, then it says number cannot be divided by 0. Okay, so this is how to use error handling to kind of handle your code, and using the except to handle particular ones. So someone will ask, is it advisable to have a general except? Sometimes yes, but to me, what I would say is that you already know the errors that could happen in your code, something like of this sort. I know either the user enters an integer, a string value, or this division by 0. Okay, so sometimes it's also good to have a general except, but Python really denies it. It's not really good for Python, though it will work perfectly. Your code goes well, but Python doesn't really clap for it. It says no, it's too broad. We want you to specify. That is the use of the except. But if you were not sure of maybe another error being occurred, then it's very good enough to kind of have another except, though Python is not clapping for that concept, but Python works with the concept perfectly. Okay, so let me show you another error that could occur. So if I have nothing here and I declare a variable here called print, a variable called value, print, I'm not declaring a variable, print value, but there is no variable called value. So if I should run the code and enter 8, see what happens, name error. Okay, so maybe I know myself that I have to handle this error as well, but should I had another maybe except which is broad, I'll say, hey, you did another error. Okay, you performed an unknown error. Okay, I don't know if I'm spelling things right. Okay, so if I enter anything, the right value, says you performed an unknown error. Okay, so that's what happened because this variable is not declared. It will spit another error for me. Alright, so that's it. If you really know there are some things you have no idea about, just put it in an except, it will work for you. But if you are sure of it, just leave them like this. Okay, so this is what you have to know within this tutorial. In the next one, I'm also going to teach you how to use the else and finally join them within your code so you can have a much perfect code. So thank you for viewing. Subscribe to the channel if you have not liked the videos, if they're informative for you, and ring the bell to receive all updates I have. If you have any questions, leave them within the comment section. Okay, thank you for viewing.